apparently I can't keep Sukriti or, you know, let Sukriti out of this group chat. Yeah. Awesome. So you're good to go?
I am good to go, thanks.
So I have a little bit of time. I think I can get the actual share screen that have the judges and competitors. I recognize that the last round, there was just like bigger things to finish or to like get done. But I'll see what I can do in terms of like getting the one that has the like people's names and judges and all
Yeah,
that.
I had the screen share pretty much the whole time last round because it was just in the background while I was figuring stuff out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, don't even worry about it. Let's call this a success.
Okay.
Yes. All right. I'm here. When Jerusalem shows up, I'll definitely need help. But thank you.
I'm glad we finally got it worked out.
Me too. All right. Bye.
Farewell.
For the judges and competitors, don't forget that we do have to update our names. Um, is Baylen still here? No. Okay. And I hope all the judges can see the chat because the titles are going in, but some of them may have been here before all the judges came in, so I'm not sure if you can see the previous chat. all the judges are here, right? There should be 5 of us. Yes. And Suzanne, you can hear and see us, right? Because I know that you're one of the judges. Just want to. Or maybe Suzanne is not at their computer.
Lightning, clouds, sky,
Weather.
precipitation.
Okay, so all the judges are here, and I know that Balin put inside the chat that they were having technical difficulties, so I guess they'll come back. And then Shub is at their other round. So should we begin? Perfect. So I guess.
I was just going to say I was asked to chair the round, but if you prefer to give the announcement.
Oh no, no one else was talking, so I just did it. You can do it.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the final round of informative speaking. Let's give our 6 finalists some appreciation. All right. So our first speaker this evening hails from St. Mary's Hall, Balin Ganeshapa. Balin, can you confirm that everything is working on your end? And are all the judges ready?
I'm ready. I also can keep time if the other judges would like me to.
That would be lovely. Thank you, Noah.
Perfect.
Okay, I am guessing that Balin is still having some technical issues. Would anyone object to us moving on to the next speaker in order and getting Balin in when we can?
Hey, I'm back. My audio is actually good now.
Oh, good. Okay,
good to go.
excellent. Perfect. So congratulations, Balin. Let's welcome you to the floor.
Getting? Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry, I was having a little bit of problems there too. Let me know when y'all are ready.
And Balin, I'm keeping time. So would you like time signals or none?
I'm all right. Thank you.
Perfect.
And before you begin, could you put your title in the chat real quick?
Oh, yeah. My bad. Cool. I have a weird last name, Ganeshapa. It comes from the story of this Indian god who, in a simplified version, gets his head chopped off by his dad, and then his mom was like, "What did you do to my son?" And then the dad was like, "Oops." So he went, killed an elephant, did some miracle spiritual surgery, and gave his son Ganesha an elephant head. India is a cool place, man. And that story also fits the weirdness of me. I'm South African, Hispanic, and Indian, or as I like to call it, Laxic-Indian, which I will admit kind of sounds more like one of my grandmother's medications. But with a last name like Ganeshapa, it'd be easy to think I'm just Indian, which apparently is a bad thing, because last year I had a jarring conversation with a teacher at my school who suggested that I should change my last name to my mother's maiden name, Gutierrez, so that when the colleges see Hispanic on my resume, they won't question it. Now, aside from how problematic that conversation was, perhaps the bigger issue is the dialogue surrounding that underlying policy, affirmative action. The New Yorker on January 13, 2020 explains, out of any admissions policy, affirmative action can be singled out as the most stigmatized and misunderstood, asserting that it has become just as much a social controversy as it has an underlying law. As a whole, we've become so focused on the binaries of race within affirmative action that we've disregarded its social and institutional impacts. And the result is not so black and white. So today, let's first explore how and why affirmative action arose. Next, view how it's affecting Americans beyond the admission system, for finally uncovering some large-scale social implications. Because as The Guardian on June 24th, 2020 puts it, understanding affirmative action is the first step toward tackling the complicated paradox of race in America. Affirmative action began as a government initiative in 1961 to offer opportunities to historically excluded groups. And it's obvious why we needed it. I mean, have you seen pictures of the NBA from 1950? Yikes. So fortunately for basketball fans everywhere, in the 1960s, both Presidents John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson passed executive orders that called for the elimination of formal legal discrimination on the basis of race. But as articulated by American historian Mark Nason, it wasn't because of some sudden burst of consciousness. It was out of fear. Early successes in the civil rights movement were fueled by campus protests, calling for racially integrated schools. And as The Atlantic on May 20th, 2020 notes, both Kennedy and Johnson feared that these protests would undermine American democracy and erode society altogether. Enter affirmative action. And what followed was a wave of colleges admitting large numbers of Black students when they previously only would have admitted a handful. Essentially, affirmative action began as riot control. And where there's control, there's concern. The solution, racial quotas. It's sort of like affirmative action's goal was, hey, I should have more diverse friends. But its implementation was more like, I need exactly 3 more Black friends. And thanks to the Supreme Court case, Regents of the University of California versus Bakke, racial quotas are illegal. But there was a catch. The Supreme Court also ruled that schools can still be racially conscious in the holistic review of an applicant, sort of the equivalent of, I should have more diverse friends. But in the past 40 years, that line has only become more blurred. With the New York Times on March 30th, 2019 noting, for many in positions of power, it's simply easier to assign numbers to minorities than to actually get to know them. One of the weirdest ironies surrounding affirmative action, as Columbia professor Kimberly Crenshaw points out, is that historically its biggest beneficiaries have also been its biggest opponents, white women. As laws like affirmative action have tried to diversify opportunity, white victimhood has emerged, and moreover, has been weaponized, creating what is colloquially referred to as reverse discrimination, the belief that deserving white students are discriminated against, while academically unqualified students of color are given their highly coveted spots and positions. As the Richmond University Law Journal argues, this false perception of affirmative action not only tokenizes students of color, who then go on to become workers of color, but also created the whole, oh, she just got that job because she's Hispanic. He's just in my classroom because he's Black mindset. However, contrary to mainstream media, affirmative action isn't just about race, it's also about income inequality. And according to a 2017 Harvard University study, at 38 of the most elite colleges in America, including 5 in the Ivy League, more students came from the top 1% of the income scale than the entire bottom 60%. To students of low-income backgrounds, that fact is a daily reminder, interpersonally and institutionally, that they're the ones who do not belong. Which is why many schools have switched to socioeconomic factors in admissions. And as Stanford University reported in August of 2017, it appears to have worked, with those schools seeing a drastic increase in socioeconomic diversity. However, that same success also underscores the problem. For many, opportunity itself is also a dream. And what happens to a dream deferred? Well, it usually applies regular decision, like the rest of us, but it also deals with a lot of the implications we see on race today. Specifically, colorblindness, or the notion that we shouldn't see race. As The Atlantic in September of 2015 explains, this issue often persists among families who believe that teaching their kids to not see race is embracing diversity. But in actuality, that's only embracing continued deprivation. As Eduardo Bonilla Silva explains in his book, Racism Without Racists, as an ideology, colorblindness legitimizes these specific practices that maintain racial inequality, such as police brutality, housing discrimination, voter disenfranchisement, and so many more. It is this same colorblind mindset we preach to our kids that prompted the organization Students for Fair Admissions in their lawsuit against Harvard University to advocate for race-blind admissions, a system that would effectively erase the life experiences of a minority. When you have actual color blindness, you don't have words for things like red or green, because to your eye, it's all the same. But when we do this with race, we leave generations of kids and parents without the language to discuss race, ironically perpetuating a cycle that only reaffirms the need for affirmative action. But second, this erasure of identity may not be as innocent as it seems. As The Atlantic in September of 2012 concerningly notes, at the peak of affirmative action controversy, institutions acted questionably bold in embracing large groups of underrepresented students, creating a system the author terms mismatch, a process in which students or employees who would excel at a mid-tier level of education or employment are instead thrusted to a top-tier one, where their learning or working styles are not supported. And as the article suggests, it seems increasingly likely that mismatch was no mistake. For years, the minority experience has been, by design, one of frequent failure. In fact, when UT professor Lino Graglia tried to point out the seriousness of mismatch, he was ostracized by administration for unveiling a painful truth, which begs the question, was the large-scale implementation of affirmative action actually designed to help students of color? Or was it systematically designed to undermine the students it quote-unquote intended to help? And in the process, undercut the very policy itself. This past June, the University of California Board of Regents unanimously voted to restore affirmative action policies in California. But after receiving nearly 3,700 outraged phone calls, it came as no surprise when the policy was shot down last November. Clearly, the conversation around affirmative action is not dying down. It's only growing louder. But until we can actually have these meaningful conversations on the policy and perhaps on race itself, future generations of kids will continue to believe that they need to change their last names to fit a collegiate system. And that might be the worst story of all.
Thank you, Balin Ganeshaba.
The time for that performance was 9 minutes and 41 seconds. 9 minutes and 41 seconds.
Colleague judges, when you are ready, if you could give some sign, I'd appreciate it.
I believe all the judges are ready. They said in the chat.
Oh, okay. I didn't see Garrett, so I wasn't sure. Okay, good. Okay, our second speaker this evening, hailing from Durham Academy, is Mukta Dharmapurakar.
And judges, just let me know whenever you're ready.
Did you put your title in the chat?
I did, but I can put it in again. It may not have sent.
No, I got it. I found it.
Okay, awesome.
And Malta, would you like time signals or are you fine?
If I could just get a fist at 10, that would be great. Thank
You
you.
got it.
Thank you. And just let me know whenever you're ready. This past month, I was sitting at home asking Siri stupid questions. What? Don't pretend like you haven't done that during quarantine. And she responded with, "You're asking me, Dad? First of all, rude. Second of all, did Siri just call me Dad?" So I went to check her settings, and sure enough, she thought that I was my dad. Let's just say, Siri and I aren't really friends anymore, but I might not be able to avoid her for very long. As former information officer Rosita Dara explains, a few years ago, personal digital assistants like Alexa, Siri, and Google Assistant sounded futuristic. But now the future is here, and it's changing the way we live, work, and communicate. British research from Omdia projects that by the end of this year, there will be more virtual assistants than people on Earth. Turns out the conspiracy theories were right. While we were worried about Putin, aliens, and murder hornets, robots really were taking over the planet. Just not the kind of robots we had originally expected. So, to better understand their global rise, let's first learn how virtual assistants evolved and function today. Then, understand their commercial and personal uses. And finally, discuss the implications of their growth. Because at a time when more of us are going online than ever, it's critical that we understand the very devices that are enabling this transition. Last week, I got into a flat Earth debate with Siri, and she wouldn't even take a side. She said the Earth isn't round or flat. No, it's an oblate spheroid. Yeah, sure, Siri. Science? We all know that's a hoax. But how did Siri both hear me and learn to tell me these lies? It all started with the 1961 IBM shoebox, which turned spoken words into electrical impulses to perform calculations. It only recognized 16 words and numbers, but in 1991, the Dragon Dictate was developed to not only recognize more words, but also to transcribe them. It used AI to match probable sentences. For example, recognizing that the word medical is more likely to be followed by miracle than a similar sounding word like marigold. Until this point, virtual assistants could understand you, but they still couldn't respond back. This changed with IBM's Watson, who performed calculations and broke down words the same way as his predecessors, but also consulted a database, just like we do on Google, to answer questions. Using this algorithm, Watson won Jeopardy in 2011. So yes, he won $1 million by Googling things. If only I could do that on my math tests. Watson unlocked the potential of virtual assistants for finding information, not just about daily doubles, but also about economic modeling or cancer research. And now, virtual assistants like Alexa and Google Assistant have the full package. They can understand, respond, and even perform actions. But most importantly, they're used by everyday consumers, a marked shift from Watson's use in professional settings. But of course, there are real people behind the voices of virtual assistants. To record them, actors repeat thousands of phonetically rich phrases. Like, Amanda, did you think to measure the trees in Des Moines? Which sounds strange, but allows programmers to conduct a process called unit selection, which is basically a giant game of bananagrams, where they combine different vowel sounds, tone, and pitch. By quantifying how real a recorded word sounds and how seamlessly phrases combine, They use mathematical modeling to turn these fragments of words into coherent speech. And voila, Siri's booking an appointment for 3 in the afternoon. What started as a simple voice-controlled calculator evolved into devices that can perform the same actions a human can, completely changing our economies and societies. In fact, virtual assistants have profound commercial and personal applications. These robots are revolutionizing our work. According to Salesforce research, almost 40% of people use virtual assistants in the workforce. And the Gartner Corporation finds in 2019 that enhanced artificial intelligence will save 6.2 billion hours of work. This starts with higher quality healthcare. When human nurses are overworked, the chance for patient danger increases by 30%. But virtual nurses devote hours of individualized patient attention when human ones can only give minutes, making hospitals safer. At Boston Medical Center, virtual nurse Elizabeth helps patients discharge from the hospital, recover after surgery, and even talks to them about sports. In case you're wondering, she's a Red Sox fan. But it's not just hospitals that need assistance. With the development of systems like Google Home and Apple HomeKit, virtual assistants can control lights, security alarms, and dishwashers. Time magazine quantifies that by 2022, 63 million, or half, of American homes will be smart homes. These homes are opening up opportunities for millions. Right now, people with disabilities often face barriers even in their own houses, like blinds that are harder to open from a wheelchair, or keypad locks that accidentally let people other than caretakers into the house. But now, smart locks connect to phones to control who goes in and out, and smart thermostats help those with conditions like cerebral palsy, who need to monitor their home at exact temperatures. Blind author Pavan Christopherson explains that Siri can even access information that his screen reader can't. Not only are virtual assistants gaining the ability to speak, they're giving millions of others a voice as well. But ultimately, they might be using these voices to warn us about their privacy and gender implications. According to a February 2020 Washington University study, hackers can control virtual assistants using inaudible ultrasonic waves, accessing phones and bank accounts remotely. These frequencies can be embedded into everyday media, allowing control of our devices through background noise, or even music we play on the radio. Freaky, right? But it doesn't stop there. By flashing a laser at a virtual assistant, University of Michigan researchers were able to force it to obey light commands, ranging from unlocking a house to starting a car, basically like real-life Star Wars. The worst part, these attacks worked from over 300 feet, the length of a football field, away. As Daniel Genkin, assistant professor of computer science at the University of Michigan, explains, criminals could receive dangerous access to homes, credit cards, or even bank accounts, threatening not only innocent consumers, but the schools, offices, and patients working with virtual nurses. But it's not just criminals who are mishandling virtual assistants. It turns out Siri has misinterpreted something we barely even notice: her gender. According to a March 2017 Indiana University study, Americans prefer women's voices because they sound more warm and trustworthy. Because of this, almost every assistant is set to a default female voice, implying that assistants must always be women. And some, like Alexa, don't even allow you to change the gender of the voice. While the top home assistants, devices we command and expect service from, are women, male assistants like IBM's Watson are famed for working with researchers, perpetuating gender discrimination worldwide. According to a 2019 United Nations study, the more that culture teaches people to equate women with assistants, the more that real women will be seen as obliging, docile, and eager to please helpers, summoned by a blunt voice command. In our increasingly digitized world, children are growing up with virtual assistants always at their service. But this access doesn't always mean progress. Data scientist Ruman Chowdhury warns that as smart speakers are increasingly used and verbally abused in the home, young children develop an impression of women as submissive and obedient. And as these children grow up, Siri reinforces these biases. According to a 2017 Quartz magazine study, after being called a slut and a bitch, Siri responded, "I'd blush if I could." Not only condoning, but encouraging sexual harassment. As technology shapes our future, the gender roles we fought so hard to overcome are returning from the past. Women are once again being minimized to assistants. Virtual glass ceiling we may never shatter. The growth of virtual assistants might sound scary, but now that we know how they evolved, their uses in healthcare and homes, and effects on our security and society, we can better prepare ourselves for this future. So next time you say, "Hey Siri," consider how her voice and your voice can be used not to assist, but to empower. Thank you.
Thank you. The time for that speech was 10 minutes and 12 seconds. 10 minutes and 12 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mukta. That now brings us in a moment to our third speaker, but I'll wait to hear, and thank you for putting the title of your speech in the chat, and I'll wait for an all clear from my colleague adjudicators in the panel. Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Venkat. Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Suzanne. All right. That brings us to our third speaker, Reese Taylor. Congratulations on advancing to finals.
Thank you. So yeah, quarantine's boring. I spent hours scrolling on TikTok, learned how to make whipped coffee, and then spent hours making TikToks about whipped coffee. This 60-second video platform became my window to the outside world. Meaning, for a solid 2 weeks, all I saw was something called the Vogue Challenge. The challenge consisted of teenagers doing their best to pose as if they're the next Vogue model. And obviously, some of us could do the challenge flawlessly. While not everyone could match this degree of success, the challenge took off. Vogue's slogan is, "Before it's in fashion, it's in vogue." I mean, self-confidence, I love it, but really it should be, "Before it's in vogue, it's in ballroom," because Vogue can be so much more than just a magazine. And when I say ballroom, I don't mean Dancing with the Stars. I mean ballroom, a revolutionary Black, Latino, and LGBTQ subculture started years ago, but is now the home to millions of people, whom we owe so much of our culture to, like phrases such as "yes, queen, slay," and tens, tens, tens across the board, all of which you'll be saying after this speech, by the way. But more seriously, ballroom's existence provides a home for those who are constantly threatened. The Atlantic mourned that when teens come out, about a quarter of them are kicked out of their homes, while a third go on to be abused by parents or caregivers. When this same youth also faces the threats of being a racial minority, it quickly becomes all the more dangerous. To better understand this life-saving subculture, first, we'll kiki and understand ballroom's beginnings. Then we'll spin and dip into how balls work. And finally, we'll sashay away with the greater impact of ballroom. But first, starting with ballroom's history and background. The history of ballroom dates back to the 1920s with the Harlem Renaissance. It was a revolution in Black culture and solidified Harlem and New York as hubs of Black art. Langston Hughes even cited in his essay, Spectacles of Colors, the beginnings of our first balls. But by the 1950s, a divide began to form. Speakeasies, clubs, bars, and lounges began to be established exclusively for white gay men, excluding queer people of color. While both groups were targeted for their sexualities, only one was persecuted for not only their sexuality, but their race. Which leads to the balls of the 80s. But before we can go to our first ball, we have to talk about what they're made out of. Houses. Pepper LaBeija, also known as the last remaining queen of Harlem drag balls, compared houses to a street gang. She said, whereas street gangs get reward from defeating each other in a fight, houses get reward from defeating each other in balls. So think Game of Thrones, but instead of beheading kings, they dragged queens. Houses are usually run by house mothers or fathers, and the children within their houses would take on the house name as their last name. Some common names you might hear are Ebony, Extravaganza, and my personal favorite, Ninja. All right, now that we have an understanding of ball history, we can explore ballroom's organization. Balls are a competitive event, like a speech tournament, but with more glitter. There are 3 categories: runway, beauty, and Vogue, just like we have public address, limited prep, and interpretation. Runway is exactly what you think it is. The goal is to strut like it is New York Fashion Week. This has a special emphasis on fashion, and of course, that runway walk. Beauty, on the other hand, is a little more nuanced, and is based off of the idea of realness, or the ability to blend into a certain gender, job, or social class. The best example of this is used with executive realness. LaBeija went on to explain that in the 80s, certain opportunities weren't afforded to Black people to allow them to rise to positions like executives and CEOs. So by dressing like one and acting like one, they were, quote, showing the straight world that they could be one. And even today, this is something we still struggle with. As of June 2nd of last year, CNN cited there are still only 4 Fortune 500 Black CEOs. The last is probably what you're most familiar with. When Madonna told the world to come on in Vogue in 1990, it wasn't a new dance she came up with, but rather an homage to ballroom. Voguing is a dance divided up into 2 distinct categories: old way and new way. Old way is a creation of the 1960s and is based off of the poses of Vogue cover magazine models, hence the name. This has a special emphasis on straight lines and angles. New way, on the other hand, is an innovation of the 80s and emphasized limb contortions and illusions. While these ways are both very different, they still include the 5 main components of voguing: catwalk, duck walk, floor performance, hand performance, spins, and dips. And just like how we compete for prizes like silver keys, balls also compete for shiny trophies too. Now that we have an understanding of ball organization, we can explore ballroom culture's critical implications. First, how ballroom culture entered the mainstream media, and second, what happens when we ostracize groups of people. There are 2 main ways that ballroom was able to enter the mainstream media. First, our prima donna Madonna released her song Vogue March 27th of 1990. Vogue went straight to the top of the Billboard Top 100 and became the best-selling song of 1990. Madonna's song put a spotlight on ballroom. The world discovered a culturally significant movement. However, its creators were left behind because a white woman whitewashed their movement. The second is the release of the documentary Paris is Burning. Released a year after Madonna's song in 1991, Paris is Burning gave the world an insight to what it was like to exist in the ballroom scene in the 80s. The title, Paris is Burning, alludes to a quote by Adolf Hitler, Paris brennt, which was asked to find out whether or not the city of Paris had fallen in World War II. The New York Times said in an article that this changed the definitive is burning instead of the is it burning is because there is no question whether or not the people in this movie have fallen. But I disagree. Paris is burning, but Paris has not burned. There is no doubt that this community is fighting to be loved, accepted, and credited for generations upon generations. But there's a reason that even if you didn't know what new wave voguing was before this speech, that you may have vogued for a TikTok dance without ever acknowledging its creators. Ballroom isn't dying, but we need to be cautious of co-opting other people's movements to serve our own purposes. Ballroom was a spark for a community of rebellion, and her generation has the opportunity to set the world on fire. And we didn't even realize it. The story of ballroom culture is a story of survival in the face of ostracization and marginalization. The original founders for the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP, were from the ballroom community and were the first to advocate on behalf of themselves and their families during the AIDS epidemic, which mainly affected this community. When the first trials for medicine against HIV and AIDS came out, they were double-blind studies, meaning half the participants received a placebo, while the other half received the real medicine. When the participants realized what was happening during the trials, they began sharing medicine between each other, ruining the trials in the process. When they were asked why they did this, they replied, "Because we're dying." Over the course of the entire epidemic, 700,000 people died. And it is still estimated that 13,000 people will die each year. Ballroom went underground due to the very thing that allowed the AIDS epidemic to prevail, feeling outside of a society with no help or validation as human beings. We have a history of looking back on these parts of the past with a rose-eyed lens. We think of the strength and the fortitude and the resilience of the people within them, but we forget who are fighting back against them. Ballroom continues to contribute to society, being a home for those who shouldn't need it, an expression for those who should not be oppressed. Ballroom's history of rebellion, their impact on current media, and their continued fight today is what we should remember. Paris is burning. Let's not be the ones adding fuel to the fire.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, Reese, that I couldn't ask you before you started if you wanted time signals, but the time for that speech was 10 minutes and 2 seconds.
It's okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reese, for that speech. We are up for our fourth speaker, who we will call up when the judges have indicated they are ready. Thank you, Venkat.
I am ready also.
Thank you, Noah.
Adam, or if the helper is still here, Garrett wrote something. Oh, okay, perfect.
Thank you, Garrett. Oh, okay. And I see Suzanne a message right at the same time. All right. Our fourth speaker is from Pennsbury High School, Amanda Gu.
Hi. I do not need any time signals. And when all of the judges are ready, can I just get a thumbs up and I'll know when to start? Hey, what's your sign? Whether you're obsessed with horoscopes and live your life by them, or make fun of people who do, or have been subjected to this cheesy pickup line, we're all generally aware of the concept of zodiac signs. Every sign has another sign that they're supposed to be compatible with. I'm a Pisces, which means, theoretically speaking, I'm supposed to be most compatible with Cancers. The crab, not the medical condition. And while in astrology he's known as Cancer the crab, it's one particular kind of crab that could be the key to combating a different kind of C, COVID-19. And this crab is known as the horseshoe crab. To understand why Dr. Christine Metz, director for the Laboratory of Medicinal Biochemistry at the Feinstein Institutes for Medical Research, exclaims in October of 2020 that the horseshoe crab could play a pivotal role in the development and deployment of a COVID vaccine, let's first learn a pinch about the horseshoe crab's physical makeup. Then we'll claw through the applications of its blood and how it can be used for a vaccine, before finally shelling out some environmental and moral implications. So you want to know something funny? The horseshoe crab isn't even a crab at all. Anatomically speaking, they're actually structured more like spiders. But because I have arachnophobia, we'll continue to refer to them as crabs for today. According to the National Wildlife Federation, the horseshoe crab's body can be divided into 3 different sections: the head, the abdomen, and the tail. The head is actually where this animal gets its name from. Because it's shaped like the bottom of a horse's shoe, the brilliant scientists who discovered this animal named it the horseshoe crab. Really creative, I know. Inside the large plated shell is the crab's brain, hearts, and organs. The head also contains all 9 of the horseshoe crab's eyes. I would say that sounds odd, but you probably saw that joke coming. The abdomen is a smaller triangular section of the horseshoe crab's body, armed with spikes on the side to protect it from future enemies. Kind of like a crossover between a porcupine and a stegosaurus, if you ask me. The tail is long and pointed, but despite its looks, is not poisonous or used as a stinger. Horseshoe crabs live in bacteria-infested beaches. Now you'd think that something that survived for over 450 million years would have chosen nice Hawaiian beaches. But this crab prefers the Atlantic coast from Maine to Mexico, as well as the beaches of Southeast Asia. These creatures are often referred to as living fossils because they've outlived dinosaurs, ice ages, and have been roaming this earth for nearly 500 million years. So, other than making dinosaurs seem weak, what is it that makes the horseshoe crab so special? Well, like Tom Selleck's mustache, the secret is in its blue blood. Horseshoe crab blood is extremely sensitive in identifying and fighting off bacterial endotoxins, such as E. coli, because it contains a substance known as limulus amoebocyte lysate, or LAL for short. Not quite laugh out loud, but almost. The Atlantic writes in February of 2014 that there exists a unique chemical within the horseshoe crab's blood cells called collagen, which forms a gel-like substance around bacterial endotoxins, trapping them in and protecting the rest of the body from infection. You can think of collagen as a movie star's bodyguards, protecting them from a potential threat, like a group of older women when they see Tom Selleck, or me when I stalk my celebrity crush, Harry Styles. The horseshoe crab's magical blood and its ability to survive for so long has made it indispensable on 2 fronts: the pharmaceutical industry and the preservation of biodiversity. First, the LAL substance was discovered by Fred Bang in the 1950s, who banged out the LAL test for bacterial contamination. Pacific Biolabs explains how the LAL extract within the horseshoe crab's blood reacts with bacteria to identify and quantify them, doing so by either undergoing a color change from blue to yellow or by forming gel clots on the substance's surface. Felicity Thomas, editor of PharmTech, writes in July of 2019 that the LAL test can produce reliable results in as fast as just 1 hour. The LAL safety test has become a vital component to administering medicine and medical equipment, such as vaccines, shots, and medical devices, because it ensures that these instruments are sterile and not contaminated. What this means is that anyone who's ever received any sort of drug, injection, or assistance by medical device or medical implant has been protected by the horseshoe crab's blood. During a global pandemic like COVID-19, this becomes even more critical in the race to find a safe, reliable vaccine. John Dubček, microbiologist and executive director of Charles River Laboratories, finds in October of 2020 that 600,000 new LAL tests must be performed in order to push out the needed doses of a COVID vaccine. But not only are these horseshoe crabs invaluable to the medical industry, but they're also essential to preserving biodiversity. They act as both food sources and hosts to other organisms. And the St. Louis Zoo asserts that without horseshoe crab eggs, the entire Atlantic shoreline ecosystem would not be able to survive. Migratory shorebirds, like the red knot, rely on horseshoe crab eggs as a replenishing snack and primary food source during migration. Sea turtles and fish also eat horseshoe crab eggs. Sharks feed on adult horseshoe crabs, and fishermen use them as bait. The bleeding of horseshoe crabs has never been seen as an issue in the past. In the 1980s and 1990s, horseshoe crab populations were still abundant along shorelines, and the practice of capturing them for their blood was even viewed as sustainable. But now, following rapid medical advancements as well as overharvesting, this ancient creature is beginning to falter. And with it comes great implications, both environmental and moral. First is the effect of decreasing horseshoe populations on the ecosystem. The Philadelphia Inquirer reveals in November of 2020 that the mortality rate of the bleeding process is close to 30%. An average of 75,000 horseshoe crabs die during the blood harvest every single year. But not all crabs die during the process itself. Many suffer when being released back into the wild. The effect is more prominent on female horseshoe crabs, who are less likely to mate after they are bled. This could be detrimental to the shoreline ecosystem, as the International Union for the Conservation of Nature explains in June of 2020, that one of the horseshoe crab's main ecological functions is to lay millions of eggs along beaches for shorebirds and fish, as well as other wildlife to consume. This is becoming even more alarming, as the US Fish and Wildlife Service reports that shorebird populations have decreased as much as 75% from 1980 to 2014 due to the lack of horseshoe crab eggs in the Delaware Bay. Plummeting populations of horseshoe crabs are extremely detrimental to the complex web of food chains and ecosystems that are interdependent on each other. It's no wonder that environmentalists are beginning to get a little crabby, if you know what I mean. But beyond the ecosystem, scientists are beginning to question whether or not it's ethical for us to continue the way that we harvest the horseshoe crab's blood. The annual crab bleeding is carried out by piercing the tissue around the crab's heart and collecting up to 40% of its blue blood, valued at $15,000 per quart, making horseshoe crab blood more valuable than gold, though you won't catch me wearing jewelry made of this stuff. When they're released back into the wild, some of these horseshoe crabs never fully recover. Scientific American explains how the effects of being away from water for so long impact the horseshoe crab's health. Many of them do not move for weeks after they are bled, and they become more susceptible to diseases, as certain blood factors are taken out during the blood harvest. The question of morality often comes up during animal testing, and the exploitation of the horseshoe crab and its blood for the sole purpose of human benefit is no different. as it's likely that you never knew that the horseshoe crab blood was used to safeguard all of your medicines and vaccines. Is it really any surprise that scientists withhold this information from the public? In the end, it forces us to ask the question, are the short-term benefits of the medicines and vaccines that we've relied on for decades, including the current COVID vaccine, worth the potential longer-term implications to our environment, or the methods in which we use to achieve those safeguards? Today, we've learned a little bit about the inner anatomy of the horseshoe crab, how it's used for the LAL safety test, and how it's currently being used for the COVID vaccine, before finally finishing it all off with some environmental and moral implications. Regardless of your opinion on astrology, I think we can all agree that when it comes to solving the COVID pandemic, the horseshoe crab is definitely a star, or as Harry Styles would say, the sign of the times.
Thank you. Your time was 10 minutes and 13 seconds.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda, for that speech.
I am also ready for the next speaker.
Hey, Adam, just sorry, quick pause. We saw that a judge might have had connection issues. What would you like us to do? Wait till the end?
I'm going to get in touch with Tad.
Okay, sweet, thank you. We'll wait. All right, but everyone's doing great. We're loving it.
Yeah, I think the best thing is I have like the live stream up, and it looks like I assume the live stream will be archived at the end, and video quality is great on it. So I think I'll just go back and watch the part that I missed.
Sounds good. And I'll let Tad know too. Okay, we have Suzanne is ready. Garrett, I assume you're ready. Noah is ready. And I'm in speaker view, so I just need to, okay, Venkat's ready. Okay, speaker, back to speaker view. All right, our fifth speaker this evening is from Dreyfus School of the Arts, Catherine Ung.
Hi, can everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm good without time. Also, sorry.
Perfect.
In 2004, the LGBTQ community of Australia decided they'd had enough. They were, in blunt terms, tired of straight people. So the gays of Australia sailed to the Pacific and planted a pride flag in what would become the gay and lesbian kingdom of the Coral Sea Islands. In this micronation, every member of the LGBTQ community is automatically granted citizenship. There's a Whole Foods on every corner, and you can't get your driver's license until you bleach your hair in a friend's bathroom. I'm just kidding. The gay and lesbian kingdom was real, but they had bigger things on the agenda than overpriced oat milk. They were actually a group of activists trying to get gay marriage to be legalized in Australia. So they started this micronation, wrote letter to the UN, and even declared war on Australia to get more attention to their movement. But we've seen this tactic before, even if we aren't all going to battle in our downtime. Every day, LGBTQ people find ways to assert our identity in declarations big and small. An LGBTQ business owner might set up shop in a gay neighborhood. A gay student might put a rainbow pin on their backpack. For me, it's doing this speech. Hey, Mom and Dad, I kissed a girl and I liked it. But there's one example of this proclamation we've all recognized. The pride flag. Globally, a flag represents and preserves a nation's culture. For queer people, it creates one. But how did the rainbow, a weather phenomenon we learned about in kindergarten, come to represent such a diverse demographic? Today, we'll look at the history, applications, and implications of the pride flag, so we can all taste the rainbow. Okay, so maybe I stole the Skittles slogan. It has a nice ring to it. Before we go any further, I want to recognize that I'm most comfortable identifying as queer. So I'll be saying the word from time to time with respect to the fact that it was historically used as a slur, like in the 70s, which may have had disco, but was also rife with homophobia. It was actually in this hostile environment that the pride flag first originated. Harvey Milk, one of the country's first openly gay elected officials, realized that his community didn't have a unifying symbol. The only existing marker was the pink triangle used by Nazis to target and kill gay people. So Milk called on local designer and drag queen Gilbert Baker to dye and sew a flag. In a moment arguably just as iconic as when Betsy Ross sewed the first American flag. In fact, Gilbert Baker's drag performance name was Busty Ross. In a 2015 interview with Refinery 29, he explains that he chose the rainbow because it was bright, colorful, and demanded to be seen. A deliberate contrast to a history of having to hide one's sexuality. A community so focused on avoiding persecution finally had a symbol to celebrate the joys of being queer. Today, the pride flag exists across the entire spectrum of sexualities and genders. The lesbian, bisexual, transgender, non-binary pride flags, and more help members of the community further understand and conceptualize their identity. Furthermore, new versions of the flag address issues of race and inclusion within the community. In 2017, the city of Philadelphia unveiled a pride flag with black and brown stripes. Amber Hikes, the city's director of LGBTQ affairs, explains that the city's gay neighborhood had a history of racism in businesses and bars. She said that this new flag called on people to listen to queer people of color. The original purpose of the pride flag was to make the LGBTQ community visible. New versions of it put more of us in the spotlight. The members of the gay and lesbian kingdom loved their rainbow merch. Their singular export was this cute little collection of international stamps with pride designs. Today, the pride flag and its variants are everywhere. It's more than just a piece of cloth on a pole. It can be a tool for advocacy. When activist Aaron Jackson purchased a house across the street from the Westboro Baptist Church, an organization infamous for its homophobic hate speech, he painted it in the colors of the pride flag, dubbed the Equality House. It's been the venue for one of the first legal lesbian marriages in Kansas and the Drag Down Bigotry Show, a drag performance and fundraiser for LGBTQ youth. With its colorful walls, the mere existence of the Equality House is an act of resistance. Unfortunately, the next application of the pride flag is a bit more sinister. Often when we think of the pride flag being waved, it's just being sold. When the calendar turns to June 1st, businesses love to put a colorful spin on their products. AT&T hosts the Love Loud Festival. UPS runs a float at NYC Pride, and the Home Depot has a line of pride furniture. But according to a 2019 Forbes report, in the 2018 election cycle alone, these three businesses donated more than $7 million to over 500 anti-LGBTQ politicians and hate groups. In public, these companies might wave the pride flag and make money off the movement, but in private, they They prop up legislators that oppose the Equality Act, that supported barring transgender troops and want to keep LGBTQ couples from adopting children. What I'm trying to get at here is that the pride flag is just as important as who is waving it and what they've done. It can be an apology, a cover-up, or an act of resistance. But one thing's for certain, it's not going anywhere. With all this talk of queer nations and queer spaces, you might be wondering, Catherine, are there any straight spaces? Totally. Cracker Barrel, high school football games, and any showing of the Fight Club. Actually, the Fight Club is kind of queer-coded. But the idea of the pride flag, of LGBTQ people uniting under a single identity, that has some pretty significant implications. First, it allows LGBTQ people to live outside of laws, cultures, and religions that may not necessarily recognize them. For instance, according to the Human Rights Watch, there are still 166 countries across the globe where gay marriage is not legal. According to Professor Alvador Lima of the University of Florida, perceiving the LGBTQ community as a metaphorical nation with its own flag validates experiences like being gay and being trans when the government may not. Everywhere from Italy to Vietnam, the rainbow flag is a reminder that living proudly is still possible. And there's a network of people across the globe that share your experiences. Second, the pride flag is a tool that everyone can use, including allies, to celebrate the LGBTQ community. Like in Carrie and Lori Riding's neighborhood in Boston, Massachusetts. In 2016, a vandal stole the Ridings' pride flag and egged their house. But in response, over 60 houses in the neighborhood started putting a pride flag in front of their own homes. The Ridings were able to feel uplifted by their community in a time when they were targeted and afraid. Everyone is encouraged to raise the pride flag and show their support. Just please don't try to profit off of it. I'm looking at you, AT&T. 70 years ago, Gilbert Baker created the pride flag so that his community could have a symbol that stemmed from a place of happiness. Today, I hope I shared with you what this flag has done for people like Gilbert and people like me. As for the gay and lesbian kingdom, Australia never actually responded to their declaration of war. But because of activists' persistent protest, Australia finally legalized gay marriage in 2017. Just like the activists refused to back down until they got the right to marry, the pride flag is a reminder it's not enough to simply tolerate LGBTQ people. Because after all this time, our identities deserve to be celebrated with, well, pride.
Thank you, Catherine. The time for that performance was 9 minutes and 54 seconds.
Thank you for that speech, Catherine.
And I'm ready for the last speaker.
Thank you, Noah and Venkat and Suzanne. And Garrett, were you ready? Maybe I didn't miss the signal. Okay, good. Then our final speaker of the evening for informative speech at the 2021 Barclay Forum for High Schools from DuPont Manual High School, Shubh Gupta.
What's up? Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh. And the title of my speech is hip hop, but I'll type that.
Thank you.
And would you like time signals or are you okay?
No thanks. Would you mind if I kept like a timer on my end too?
Yeah, you can.
Cool. Sure. Just a little bit up. All right. Am I good to go? I love rap music, but sometimes I don't even understand what I'm listening to. Take, for example, these lyrics from Ghostface Killah. Why is the sky blue? Why is water wet? His name's Ghostface Killah, not Bill Nye the Science Guy, or Lil Pump with his hit single, Gucci Gang. Gucci Gang, 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 Gucci Gang. When does he start rapping? Or my personal favorite, Kanye, with his avant-garde composition, Lift Yourself. Poopity scoop, scoop diddy whoop, whoop de scoop de poop, poop de scoopity, scoopity, whoop. Thank you, Kanye. Very uplifting. Now don't let these lyrics fool you. Rap's a pretty cool genre, a genre that Nielsen Music finds has surpassed rock to become the most consumed music type in the United States. But today's rap music is simply one aspect of the larger hip-hop culture. Then hip-hop's significance transcends a few rap lyrics. The Time magazine called it the most influential culture on the planet. And NPR, today's civil rights movement. Because hip-hop's power lies in its ability to give voice to the disenfranchised and spark real change. And in a time when we're going through a social revolution, it's more important than ever that we gain a better understanding of hip-hop culture. So let's first uncover its humble origins and major components before examining its global influence. And finally, wrapping up with the future of hip-hop's power for social change. So if rap's just one component of hip-hop, what's hip-hop? Xavier Jernigan, pop culture historian, explains that hip-hop started in the South Bronx in the early 70s, with many experts pointing to this man, Jamaican DJ Kool Herc, as the founding father of hip-hop. He noticed that a party's energy peaked during the instrumental break of a song, where the singing stopped, but the music kept going. So he replaced the vocal section with the instrumental break from another record, thus keeping the party going. With this breakthrough, Kool Herc set the foundation for the rest of hip-hop culture, which, according to legendary pioneer DJ Afrika Bambaataa, can be divided into the four pillars of hip-hop. The first is the DJ, responsible for maintaining and creating a break. The second, the MC, who spoke over the DJ during the breaks, which eventually evolved into what we now know as rapping. The third, breaking, where dancers showcase their flamboyant moves on the dance floor. And finally, graffiti, where artists spray paint complex images and writings to draw attention to an issue. See, hip-hop gave the African-American and other minority youth of the South Bronx the means of creative expression. But while the four pillars make up hip-hop, it stands for so much more. In fact, Bambaataa coined this exigence as the fifth, foundational element of hip-hop. Knowledge, the pursuit of self-awareness and social consciousness. The Harvard professor Marcelina Morgan describes knowledge as a constant push to deal with reality, allowing these youth to voice the most pressing issues facing their communities. You see, hip-hop quickly became an instrument for social progress. Nowadays, it seems like hip-hop is everywhere, and I've seen it firsthand. My Aunt Pooja in India can't stop talking about Drake's new album. But how did hip-hop go from a niche urban culture to a global phenomenon? Well, the rise of platforms like MTV certainly helped it spread in the 80s and 90s, making rappers like Tupac and Jay-Z household names. But it wasn't until the last decade or so with the advent of streaming services like Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube that have really pushed rap music and in turn hip hop into the global spotlight, allowing anyone, including my Aunt Pooja, to listen. And as hip hop goes global, it infuses itself into the cultures it encounters. Now just take India, for example, where a March 23rd, 2020 article from Rolling Stone explains that these hip hop artists, known as playback acts, have taken over the Indian music industry, performing the majority of songs behind Bollywood dance sequences. And this blending of hip hop and traditional Bollywood creates a unique syncretic feel that can be seen all across the globe, from Japanese streetwear to graffiti on the Berlin Wall. It's even going as far as influencing international politics and diplomacy. The early 2010s were a period of immense social change in the Arab world, where pro-democracy protests swept half a dozen nations in the Arab Spring. But as explained by Augsburg College professor Samantha Kentrell, hip-hop played an integral role in the development of these uprisings. Take, for example, in Tunisia, where in 2011, then 22-year-old rapper El General wrote Rais El Bled, a song that would become the anthem of protests across the Arab world, with lyrics like, "Mr. President, your people are dead, and I see injustice, that's why I speak out." This song inspired millions to fight for their rights, eventually leading to the deposing of then dictator Ben Ali and the establishment of the now democratic government of Tunisia. By now, it's clear that hip hop isn't just a music genre, it's an art form with an incredible power for social change. But some argue that today's hip hop seems to be going in the wrong direction because socially conscious lyrics have been replaced by socially degrading ones. A recent study conducted by Georgetown University found that 95% of rap songs contain lyrics deemed violent, 80% glorifying drugs, and 40% objectifying women, leading many to believe that hip hop is one of our generation's biggest perpetrators. But as reasoned by Becky Blanchard, professor of race at Stanford University, this criticism of hip hop ignores its origins and principle of knowledge. You see, hip hop started as a way for the Black community to voice their lived experiences, a community entrenched in a fight against social, political, and economic oppression. And given that their people have been victim to the war on drugs, disproportionately high rates of incarceration, and rampant societal bias, it's no wonder these themes are mirrored in the lyrics themselves. Hip hop isn't a cause of our societal woes, it's a reflection. And as it spread out from its original community, it was further commercialized and exploited for profit. And lyricism went from a narration to a glorification because sensationalism sells. And now that hip hop is a global phenomenon, unfortunately, there's no turning back. But some artists are working to ensure that the same principles instilled by the Black community in hip hop's beginnings carry on to its future. Artists like Kendrick Lamar and Logic, who are returning back to its roots in knowledge with lyrics that are anti-drug and anti-violence, or like female rappers Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion and their hit single, WAP. According to a September 2020 article in Complex, by reclaiming their sexuality, they're challenging the male-dominated industry in its misogynistic state. Or how last summer, in the wake of protests surrounding the death of George Floyd, Lil Baby released The Bigger Picture, a social commentary on police brutality, donating all proceeds to the Black Lives Matter movement. Whether it be the 1970s New York youth or the Arab Spring, or now modern day artists fighting for social justice, hip hop has an incredible potential to uplift the voices of the unheard and create a better society for all. But it's up to us, the consumers, to decide whether or not hip hop lives up to that potential. Because it's the songs that we choose to listen to and promote that determine whether hip hop continues to be our generation's biggest perpetrator or its most needed savior. And if you need any more proof of hip hop's brilliance, just ask Lin-Manuel Miranda. In a recent interview with Time magazine, Miranda stated that he chose hip hop as the genre for his musical Hamilton because it was so effective at communicating big ideas, something characteristic of Hamilton's own writing style. And when we let these big ideas, these stories of others inspire us, just as the 1970s New York City youth used it to usher a global movement, we too can use the power and knowledge of hip hop to lift ourselves. Thank you, Kanye.
Thank you. The time for that speech was 10 minutes and 5 seconds. 10 minutes and 5 seconds.
All right, thank you for that final speech. Again, let's give a round of appreciation to our finalists who made the great accomplishment of advancing to this round today. Let's thank our 5 judge panelists, particularly Noah for keeping time and getting us on track when we started. So thank you, Noah. I'd also like to recognize fellow key coach, Suzanne Terry from Tennessee, who's an esteemed member of our panel this evening.
Thank you. Hello, my friend. It's good to see you.
Likewise. Well, it's good to hear your voice, I'll say. And again, contestants, all the best to you. Thank you for bringing such important issues to our attention this evening. We wish you the best with your continued pursuit of that through the rest of the season. And thank you again for participating in the Barkley Forum for High Schools. We wish you all the best as the results are revealed tomorrow evening in the streamed award ceremony.
Yes, congratulations, everyone. Good luck and stay safe.
Congrats, everyone. Good luck, guys, in future tournaments.
Thank you for judging.
Good night, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
Have a great night.
Judging.
Good night.